What if the most shocking stories about Caligula are not the whole story at all? Tonight we put the headlines on pause and ask a simple, serious question you can carry through the entire episode. Among the viral tales that race across comment sections and short clips, which parts are actually confirmed by sources and which parts are legends retold until they feel like fact? Myth or fact is not a slogan here. It is a method. And if you stay with me, you will leave with a cleaner filter for history on the internet. For generations, the name Caligula has been attached to exaggeration. A young emperor, a court glittering with rumor, enemies eager to write the last chapter for him. It is the perfect environment for stories to grow wild. This video avoids the cheap thrill. No sensational language. No needless shock. Instead, we slow down and cut each tale open with care, comparing what the loudest versions say to what the sources actually wrote. Your time matters and the past deserves respect. Across this series, we will examine 5 of the most contested claims. Each one will be placed on a clear track. First, the story as it is commonly told. Next, the political and cultural setting that produced it. Then, the evidence that remains and how strong it is. Finally, what a responsible conclusion sounds like today. By the end, you will have a simple toolkit you can use on any dramatic piece of history you see online. Ask for context. Ask for sources. Ask how confident we should be. Imagine Rome under the Julio-Claudian line. Marble streets glowing after sunset. Processions moving past statues of the emperors. The air heavy with incense and ceremony. The empire is an engine of loyalty, ritual, and performance. Power is rehearsed in public with gestures, with costumes, with staged appearances that say the emperor stands between world and chaos. Around that theater of rule politics hums. Senators whisper in shaded colonnades. The Praetorian Guard watches every doorway, and in the upper rooms of palaces, scribes and courtiers measure every word, knowing that every rumor could become tomorrow's record. This is the world Caligula steps into. To understand him, we have to understand the stage. The first reason Caligula's image swelled into legend is bias. Some of our most vivid stories come from authors with their own aims. A senator can defend the dignity of the Senate by painting the emperor in difficult colors. A later historian can magnify flaws to warn future generations about the danger of one person's rule. The second reason is distance. Several accounts were written decades after the events. Memory hardens, details blur, and dramatic tales are easier to remember than careful nuance. The third reason is politics. After any violent transfer of power, the winners often control the narrative. A fallen ruler becomes a cautionary example, and the loudest stories are the ones that serve the new order. So here is our approach. We cross-check multiple sources rather than trusting a single exciting line. We separate symbolic language from literal events because ancient authors loved parable and irony, and we grade confidence out loud, high, medium, or low. That way you know when we are standing on bedrock and when we are walking on sand. Transparency is not a decoration, it is the heart of responsible storytelling. You will hear the name Suetonius, who collected imperial anecdotes with an eye for color. You will hear Cassius Dio, whose sweeping Roman history often adds commentary from his own era. You will hear Philo, who gives us a close view of the religious tension of the time. None of them should be worshipped. None should be dismissed. They are voices. Our job is picture a dim hall somewhere in the Palatine complex. A senator pauses at the threshold and weighs a sentence before he speaks. A guard shifts his weight and studies the room. A scribe keeps his stylus ready not to spy, but because the words spoken tonight may become tomorrow's law. The mood is careful, often anxious. In that atmosphere, a sarcastic line can turn into a headline. A ceremonial gesture can be remembered as a scandal. When a society performs power in public, myth blooms quickly. The same thing happens on social media today. The platforms change. The human appetite for spectacle does not. That is why this story matters now. We live in a time when short clips and strong claims travel faster than context. The Roman Empire did not have an algorithm, but it had an audience hungry for drama and authors ready to provide it. Learning to sift Caligula's myths. In the next segment, we walk into the most famous room of all, A banquet where a single line about a horse becomes a legend that still trends today. Was it a literal plan, a threat, an inside joke that drifted out of context? We will hear what the sources say, weigh their motives, and mark our confidence clearly. Step with me from rumor to record, from noise to knowledge. The myth is loud, the fact is steady. Let us start listening for it. We ended on a question: when a single line at a banquet turns into a headline for centuries, what exactly was said, and what did it mean? Picture the room. Lamps wash the walls with warm light. Silver plates reflect a soft haze. The emperor sits at the center, easy in his chair, entertained by the hum of a court that lives on glances and subtext. A senator leans forward, just enough to be noticed. A praetorian at the doorway pretends not to listen. Someone praises the emperor's favorite horse, Incitatus. Glossy coat, precise gait, a creature bred for show. Caligula smiles, then says something sharp, playful, and calculated. He speaks of making the horse a senator or a priest, or perhaps one day a consul. A few guests laugh too loudly. A few stop laughing too quickly. The sentence slides across the table like a blade. That sentence is where the legend begins. Over time, the horse becomes proof of wild arrogance, the emblem of a ruler who confused theater with governance. But if we slow down, 3 layers appear, and each one matters. First, the threat. In any monarchy, words about appointments are not jokes. They are signals. The emperor does not need to make the horse a consul to make his point. He only needs to imply that he can elevate anyone or anything above the Senate's pride. The message to the elite is simple: and chilling your dignity depends on me. In this read, the horse as consul is a warning shot across the marble floor. Confidence level on the literal claim low. Confidence that the line worked as a flex medium. Second, the metaphor. Ancient writers loved satire. Turning a horse into a statesman is an image you would find in a sharp political cartoon today. It belittles the class that claims reason and tradition as its birthright. If Caligula wanted to puncture senatorial self-importance, this quip did the work. It also gave hostile authors a perfect hook. When a later historian wants to show an emperor's contempt, the horse is ready-made symbolism. Once a metaphor is catchy, it is dangerous. People will repeat it without the context that kept it balanced. Confidence that later retellings polish the metaphor until it sparkled high. Third, the ritual. Courtly life lives on excess stables with carved mangers, garlands, attendants who speak to animals as if to princes. Lavish treatment of a favorite horse may have been a display of wealth, taste, and ceremony, not a literal promotion. At elite dinners, mock titles, playful toasts, and theatrical promises show a ruler's control over reality, at least inside the room. In that frame, the scene reads less like policy and more like pageantry. Confidence that Incitatus received extravagant honors medium. Confidence that a formal consulship was granted low. Let us return to the table. A courtier tries a careful joke to match the emperor's tone. If the horse is to join the Senate, may we prepare him a ring. A few brave laughs. The scribe at the edge of the room notes the exchange for the record of festivities, not for law. The atmosphere relaxes. The moment passes. But for an enemy in the audience, the line is useful. It can be retold in a way that makes the emperor look reckless and the Senate look victimized. Years later, a writer shaping a moral lesson trims the scene to its sharpest edge. The nuance fades. The punchline remains. Why does this matter to us? Because symbolic language is the bloodstream of politics, then and now. The horse as consul sounds absurd because it is meant to be absurd. It is a device that tests how far a ruler can stretch the frame of public life. In the digital present, leaders stage moments just as deliberately, a jacket draped, just so a phrase repeated until it becomes a brand, a post designed to bait a reaction. The medium changes, the toolkit of spectacle remains. So what should we take away? First, separate the literal from the theatrical. Ask, was this a promise, a threat, or a performance? Second, grade the claim. If the loudest version of a tale sounds like an internet meme from the 1st century, it probably is. Third, follow the function. In a tense room, an outrageous line can unify loyalists, unsettle rivals, and generate a story that keeps the ruler at the center of the conversation. Back in that lamplight, a final exchange seals the meaning. A sober senator lifts his cup and says, "May Rome always be served by steady hands." The emperor answers with a pleasant nod that manages to say everything and nothing. The horse paws the floor, impatient for motion. Outside, the city keeps its rhythm. Inside, a sentence has done its work. Our confidence rating on the horse's office low, on literal office medium, that the line was delivered high, that it served as a political jab and a perfect seed for legend. The myth is loud, the fact is steady, and both feed on performance. Next, we leave the banquet hall and step into salt air. We will watch an emperor stitch boats into a road across the Bay of Baiae. Was it nonsense? Or was it a calculated spectacle with a target in mind? Let us walk the water and find out. We step out of the banquet's lamplight and into the salt air, where rumor becomes architecture and a sentence turns into a stage. Dawn leans over the Bay of Baiae like a pale curtain. The water is quiet at first, then stirs as oars bite and lift, bite and lift. Dozens of ships have been pulled side by side, lashed tight, their decks braced with timbers, their seams packed to make a floating causeway. From the hills, spectators gather, sailors, families, merchants, messengers, soldiers on break, drawn by a promise they have only half believed. The emperor will ride across the sea. Why build a bridge of boats? 3 motives, each clear, when set in the world that raised Caligula. First, to kill a prophecy. Somewhere in the churn of oracles and gossip, a prediction had spread that he had no more chance to become emperor than to ride across the Bay of Baiae. Superstitions can stalk power. He chose to step on its neck. Second, to steady his image. A young ruler inherits a state that whispers about succession and stability. A feat like this tells Rome that the helm is firm. Third, to craft what we would now call a media event. In a culture where ceremony is a language, spectacle is a sentence everyone can read. Look at the details. Signal flags crack. The command rolls down the line of boats. Engineers test the joints one last time. On the shoreline, priests stand with incense not to bless a miracle but to frame it. Rome works through rite. Then the sound changes. Hooves drum a steady line as the emperor's horse steps from earth to wood. A column of riders follows, cloaks, pinned faces set in the practiced calm of public performance. The bridge creaks but holds. The crowd exhales as one. Was this madness, or was it meticulous? Set it inside the Julio-Claudian world, and it becomes legible. Emperors did not merely rule. They curated images. Triumphs, processions, public games, these were political instruments, proof of order embodied. Baiae was a resort, a place of display. A grand gesture on those waters would ripple through the city in 1,000 retellings, each confirming that Caligula could bend nature into a road, or at least had the daring to try. Along the route, courtiers keep the cadence of confidence. One rides close enough to be heard. "The bay is calm today," he says. Or obedient, the emperor answers, voice light but aimed. On a nearby hull, a foreman barks to his men. Short words, simple, get the rope, brace that beam. This is theater, yes, but theater that runs on craft. Carpenters, sailors, quartermasters, all invisible in rumor and essential in reality. Their competence is the quiet spine of the spectacle. Across the water, the bridge becomes a stage for symbols. Standards rise, catching a wind that seems to arrive on cue. Musicians strike a steady rhythm, not loud enough to drown the creak of timber, just enough to fuse horse and deck into a single moving shape. The emperor lifts a hand. It is both a greeting to the crowd and a note to the future. Record this. Tell it. Let it stand against every whisper. To modern ears, the image may sound absurd, but the function is familiar. Power everywhere, choreographs reassurance. A leader tours a factory floor in a hard hat, speaks beneath a banner at an airfield, throws a ceremonial pitch. These scenes are not policy, they are punctuation. They tell supporters they are seen and tell doubters the center holds. The Bay of Baiae, in that sense, is less a stunt than a sentence in the grammar of rule. Critics at the time likely smirked. A senator watching from a shaded tent might have murmured, "A bridge to nowhere." Another more practical would have asked about cost, about safety, about priorities. And yet both would have seen the same thing. The crowd saw a young emperor who understood that fear and faith are shaped in public, that a prophecy can be answered not by argument but by image. Was there risk? Of course. If a beam failed or a horse slipped, the story would curdle into mockery. That is the risk of any bold narrative. But the very presence of risk is part of the point. Daring managed well becomes evidence of destiny. In that calculus, success buys time to govern, to negotiate, to plan. If you want to read this scene kindly, see a ruler using theater to stabilize a fragile moment. If you want to read it harshly, see a ruler spending resources to feed an appetite for attention. Either way, it worked as communication. So we graded. Confidence that a floating bridge was built across Baiae High. Confidence that it was tied to a prophecy and staged as proof of power, medium to high, given the culture of public ritual. Confidence that it was madness with no purpose, low. Seen in context, it is not nonsense. It is a controlled broadcast in an age before cameras. As the cavalry reaches the far shore, a cheer runs along the beach, then returns like an echo. The emperor dismounts, accepts water, speaks briefly, words we cannot hear but can guess, gratitude, pride, the careful humility of someone who knows every syllable will be weighed. The wind lifts and the scent of salt folds back over the planks. Next, we step away from spectacle and into stone. We follow surveyors into valleys and along ridges where channels will carry water toward Rome. Beyond the image, what did this rain build that lasted? Let us walk the line of an aqueduct and listen for the steadier music of infrastructure. We leave the wind off Baiae behind and walk inland, where spectacle gives way to stone, where an emperor's image must meet the daily weight of water. At first light, the hills east of Rome are cool and quiet. A line of surveyors stands with rods and cords, eyes narrowed against the Sunday. A senior engineer raises a simple tool, an A-frame, with a hanging plumb, and waits for the string to go still. Again, he says, and the team shifts a few steps, tracing a fall so gentle it feels like a secret, a handful of inches for every 100 feet. This is how an aqueduct moves a city, not with drama but with discipline. And it is here in the grit of measurement and the patience of alignment that we see another side of Caligula's reign. The reputation says waste and whim. The record says something more complicated. In the year 38, two great waterworks are set in motion, the Aqua Claudia and the Anio Novus. Claudius will later finish them, cut the ribbons, and lend them his name in triumphal inscriptions. But the survey lines, the budgets, the contracts for stone and lime, those begin earlier. If the bridge at Baiae was a sentence in the grammar of power, these channels are paragraphs in the prose of government. They are not made for a day. They are built to outlast tempers and rumors. Watch the crew at work. A quarry master tests a block with his hammer, tap, 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 listening for the right ring. A mason wets a trowel and smooths mortar into a joint. The foreman calls for a break, and the men step aside to drink the very thing they are delivering to others, clear water carried from a temporary cistern under a canvas awning. No one gives speeches here. The pride is quieter. A young assistant hare tied back squints down a channel and grins when the surface glides forward in a perfect glassy line. She runs, he says, and the engineer nods. Small victories add up to a city that breathes. What did these aqueducts mean for real people? More than spectacle ever could. They fed fountains in crowded neighborhoods where a clay jar could change a morning. They supplied bathhouses, where sore backs and tired feet found relief at day's end. They turned mills, watered gardens, and steadied the heartbeat of the markets. In a capital where summer could strip tempers bare, cool, reliable flow was not a luxury, it was policy. Caligula's time in power was brief and turbulent, but the choice to extend Rome's water spine tells us that governance continued even as narratives were being sharpened against him. A clerk from the treasury rides up the line, leather satchel bumping at his side. He hands the engineer a sealed tablet and waits. Budgets are tight as always. The engineer reads, sighs, and smiles anyway. We proceed, he says. The clerk relaxes. Behind those few words, there are debates we cannot hear. Priorities weighed against prestige, immediate needs against long horizons. Continuity wins today. Claudius will later inherit the momentum, add arches that walk across the Campagna in clean, repeating geometry, and claim the applause that comes with completion. That too is how states work. One hand plans, another hand finishes, and history gives the credit to whoever cuts the ribbon. None of this cancels the controversies, it complicates them. A leader can stage a spectacle and still empower engineers. A court can talk in sharp metaphors at night and fund masonry at dawn. If you want to judge fairly, hold both truths at once, the theater and the trench. For a listener in the United States, this may feel familiar. We have our own arguments about roads and bridges, about grids and pipes, and the politics of who gets what when. Groundbreakings make headlines. Maintenance rarely does. Yet the test of leadership is not only what dazzles, it is what endures. The Romans knew this. They carved their priorities into arches that anybody could count. Near midday, the team pauses beneath a half-finished arcade. The shade is thin, but welcome. A veteran mason, hands chalky with lime, tells the apprentice why the joints must be tight. Water remembers, he says. Treat it with respect, and it will serve you. Rush it, and it will teach you a lesson you will not forget. The apprentice laughs softly, then turns serious, tracing the groove with his fingertip. He will tell that line to someone else in 10 years. Infrastructure is skill passed down as much as stones stacked up. So where does this leave our picture of Caligula? With balance. The evidence says that under his watchwork began on systems that improved ordinary life and outlived his politics. Claudius, steadier in reputation, brought those lines to completion and wrote his name where everyone could see it. Together by sequence rather than harmony, they delivered a common good. Let us grade our confidence as we have throughout. Confidence that Aqua Claudia and Anio Novus were launched before Claudius and completed under him high. Confidence that these projects signal a governing logic beyond spectacle medium to high, because water does not flow by accident. Confidence that this erases the darker stories low. Complexity is not erasure. From the hush of these hills, we follow the channels toward the city where arches will step over valleys and disappear into the belly of Rome. Ahead, another story waits, one charged not with engineering but with belief. It is the story of a statue that never should have been ordered a holy place, that could not bear an emperor's face, and a crisis that pushed power to its breaking point. We follow the quiet arc of the aqueducts toward Rome, and the sound of water fades into a different kind of pressure, the pressure of belief meeting power. The crisis forms far from the Senate floor in a city whose sacred center is not the emperor's image, but a temple with a law older than Rome. Word spreads that the ruler in Rome favors honors that treat his presence as divine an expectation, common across the empire, but impossible in Jerusalem. Here is the collision. A political habit, public reverence for the emperor, crosses a boundary that a community understands as absolute. What for many provinces is ceremony becomes in this place an intrusion into the heart of worship. Tension rises not because people seek conflict, but because they protect what they cannot surrender. Enter the courtyards of diplomacy. A delegation travels carrying letters, arguments, and a tone shaped by both urgency and respect. Their task is to draw a line without provoking a storm. They speak of law of conscience, of the peace that depends on restraint. In the imperial circle stand other forces administrators who want order officers, who want clear commands, courtiers who read the emperor's mood like weather. Each group tries to frame the question so that their preferred answer feels like common sense. Imagine the audience chamber. The air is still, the floor gleams. A petitioner steps forward and chooses each word with care. There are places, he says, where a statue honors authority, and there are places where any image at all would break the world open. We ask you to preserve the difference. He does not raise his voice. He does not accuse. He appeals to the one thing that can end a crisis before it ignites judgment willing to hold back. Around him, listeners measure the moment. Will firmness prevail or will flexibility? This is the hinge of the story. Some accounts emphasize the push toward installing imperial presence inside the sacred precinct. Others highlight the work of mediators who stall, redirect, and try to buy time. Governors weigh the likely outcomes, messengers ride, priests and community leaders encourage calm. For weeks, perhaps months, the empire practices the art of delay. Delay is not weakness here. It is policy. It lets tempers cool and gives leaders space to choose a path that preserves dignity on all sides. Then, our narrative returns to Rome, where politics tightens into a knot. The Palatine festival approaches games ceremony and the theater of unity. The city is tuned to celebration, but under the surface runs a second rhythm calculation. Alliances inside the guard have frayed. Grievances circle. A handful of men decide that the center must shift. We will not dwell on the mechanics. We keep distance from detail out of respect for viewers and platform standards. What matters for our purpose is the sequence tension contained abroad, tension released at home. In this frame, the assassination is not a spectacle for retelling. It is the sudden end of a chapter that began with promise and moved through controversy. The timing during public festivities says something about the stakes. The actors choose a moment when the city's attention is gathered, when movement can hide in movement. Afterward, confusion spreads as it always does. Doors close, orders compete. The empire does what empires do. It reorganizes around whoever can speak with authority and make the trains of ritual and administration run again. What does this teach us beyond one ruler's fate? That religious boundaries are not minor details. They are load-bearing beams in a society. Pressure them without care, and the house shakes. That power, if unchecked by procedure and patience, tends to escalate a disagreement into a crisis. And that in moments when words could break a deadlock, the most useful tools are empathy, precedent, and the willingness to honor differences that do not harm the common good. Now we close not with a verdict, but with a method you can carry forward. Throughout this series, we have used a simple frame context, first sources, next confidence grades, and careful comparisons across time. Bối cảnh, nguồn, mức độ xác tín, so sánh liên thời. When you hear a claim, whether about a horse made a consul, a bridge across a bay, or a statue that threatened a city's soul, ask where the claim was born, who repeated it, how close they were to the events, and what incentives they carried. I would love to hear from you. Which myth about Caligula did you once accept, and what made you pause and reconsider? Was it a missing detail, a date that did not fit, or the realization that a symbol had been treated as literal truth? If this way of reading history resonates with you, please subscribe, share this episode with a friend who enjoys careful storytelling, and drop a name for the next figure you want us to examine. We commit to responsible content, respectful language, clear sourcing, and narratives that honor your attention. In the end, we are not here to chase shock. We are here to understand people, those who lived under marble arches, and those who scroll through headlines today. When we look beyond the noise to the steadier lines of cause and effect, of ritual and restraint, we do not just meet the past, we meet our own habits of belief. That is the real reward of history done with care.